This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hi, you are listening to Raising Me, and this is where we take everyday parenting challenges right to the experts for advice. And we have an expert teaching us about money, teaching our kids about money, what allowance should look like, and what a conversation looks like for a little one versus, say, someone in high school. We're revisiting key takeaways in our Money Mindset series. It's particularly timely in my house and in so many right now as kids are working their first jobs or their summer jobs, managing a paycheck for the first time in so many cases. Mary Dyer is our guest, and she is with the Finance Authority of Maine, and such an awesome resource when it comes to this. Here's one of the best parts of our conversations. Mary assures us as parents, we do not have to be an expert to have a lot to offer our kids when it comes to money lessons. So we start with a look back at finding balance with allowance. I wonder how long, though, kids should get an allowance. Like, once they've started working a job, do we still stick with allowance because it is, home-based activities? Or, is there sort of a sweet spot with the age where it's like, okay, enough with the allowance. You can go make your money outside of the house?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents let go of the allowance once the child is working part-time when they're a teenager. And perhaps instead, then if they continue to use it, use that goals-based approach that we talked about. Things get more expensive, as you know, as our kids get older. The things that they want, whether it's iPhones or video games or sports equipment, music equipment, things get more expensive. And so perhaps you take a goals-based approach where they're needing to make a big purchase, they're earning money outside of the home, but then contributing at home, and part of that payment for that contribution, you're putting money into, whatever their financial goal is. So that might be a great approach to migrate from actually paying them a direct allowance and instead contributing towards their financial goal.
And speaking of the items getting more expensive, how do you deal with requests for more money for their allowance? It's inevitably going to happen. So what advice do you have for dealing with those? I just need a little more, or, hey, I'm not getting paid enough. That, mopping the floors just isn't for me. This is hard labor. So how do we deal with those requests or demands? I say requests, but sometimes it's
Sure.
delivered more in a demanding kind of way.
Yeah, I think that, of course, as we talked about, using that rule of thumb, $1 to $2 for every age. So as they get older, that's going to increase. If they're asking for more money, you should require that they take on additional chores. That again, your expectations will increase. But if we're trying to teach financial lessons, just handing them that additional money because they've demanded it is absolutely a big don't. As we look at do's and don'ts, that is absolutely a don't. So if they're wanting to make a big purchase or they want to earn more money, just like in the real world, you have to do something in exchange for that. So if they want more, they're going to have to contribute more and participate more in, the day-to-day chores and the workings of the household.
Mary, I'm obsessed. I love everything about what you just said. I don't know that my kids will love it quite as much, but that's why we're here. Why should we be having these conversations with our kids, no matter their age, whether they are, like you have the 18 and 23-year-old, I have a 4-year-old. There are many kids, obviously, in that different range. So regardless of the time that you're starting, it's just key to start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's never too late. As I said with savings, it's never too late to start having these conversations. The reality is, your child, as they enter adulthood, like you, they are going to be making financial decisions every single day of their lives, sometimes multiple times a day. And so, as much as you can arm them with that knowledge and information and where to find resources, should they need help, they will be in a much better position. And the reality is in all of the research and all that we know, when adults are polled and they're asked about their money influencers, parents and caregivers and family members are the greatest influence when it comes to how we learn to manage our finances. And so, whether you realize it or not, you're influencing them and you are an important influencer in that process. And I think the other thing that is important is that if we don't teach them and support them in learning, who will? Will it be social media? Will it be the internet? Will it be their peers and their neighbors and their, coworkers? Those aren't always the best influences. And, with the proliferation of social media, there's a lot of financial information on, social media and how to get rich quick and all of that. And that's not necessarily the place that we want our children to learn. They may or may not be learning about it in school. Some schools have very robust personal finance courses and content that they're offering to students, and others don't. So you really don't want to leave it to chance, and you don't want to set your child up for a situation that many adults are in, where they just have to learn by trial and error. They don't have that foundational knowledge at home, and then they learn as they get older through trial and error approach, which isn't the best way to learn.
They're hard conversations, but the point is just have the conversations, right? And it's funny. This is no judgment, because I think we all sort of have okay, how do we get started? But there was a study also that you provided that 3 out of 10 parents would rather talk to their child about the birds and the bees than talk about money. And actually, I think that number is on the low side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. More parents would, not necessarily more, but 3 out of 10 prefer that birds and the bees conversation. I think it's 2 out of 10 prefer to have the conversation around drugs and alcohol and substance use and all of that. I think that just goes to show how much anxiety we have around having these conversations. And I think it all tends to stem from, we don't feel like we are experts. And unless we're an expert and we know that we're making the best financial decisions for ourselves, then we feel hesitant. But the reality is, you have a lot to share. You have a lot to offer, no matter what, position you're in financially.
That's an excellent segue into, you have 3 pieces of advice for parents when it comes to this. And I think you just hit the nail on the head, is that we're unsure that we're doing the right things. So how do you teach that then to somebody else? So what are your 3 places for parents to start?
So first of all, before diving into the 3, I just want to reassure parents that you don't have to be an expert. You're making financial decisions every single day. And by having an open conversation with your child, they will learn from you. And you don't have to be a finance guru. You don't have to be perfect with money. In some ways, learning through some of the mistakes that you made can be valuable. So just first of all, remember that. Don't have to be an expert.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Let's start with why it is so important to be teaching our kids about money.
It's important because, of course, as adults, we are making financial decisions on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. And unfortunately, for many adults, they learn by trial and error. They make mistakes, they learn, hopefully. Uh, but so many of us don't receive that foundational knowledge at home or at school. And so we get into adulthood and we start making financial decisions without a foundation. So that can be kind of the negative outcome of not teaching your child about money. The sooner that you can begin to have money conversations and provide financial lessons, the better prepared your child will be once they enter adulthood and they're making those big financial decisions, whether it's how to pay for college, buying a first car, renting an apartment. The more that we can provide them with that foundational knowledge, the better off they'll be into adulthood making those decisions.
What are your 3 places for parents to start?
So first of all, before diving into the 3, I just want to reassure parents that you don't have to be an expert. You're making financial decisions every single day. And by having an open conversation with your child, they will learn from you. And you don't have to be a finance guru. You don't have to be perfect with money. In some ways, learning through some of the mistakes that you made can be valuable. So just first of all, remember that. You don't have to be an expert. I think of the 3 tips, there's so much that we can share, but I think the first thing for parents is to be thinking about and examining your own attitude toward money. So this is before we get into tips with your child, things for yourself to begin thinking about and doing. Think about your own money mindset. Think about what your money influencers are, some of the money memories that you have growing up, and what has influenced you and your emotions. What we know is that despite all of the knowledge that we can, attain and, that we teach people, our emotions and our psychology is really what drives a lot of our financial decision making. So even though I know I'm supposed to save and set aside money, I emotionally, don't always make the right decisions. And so getting in touch with those emotions and recognizing your attitude or the language that you use regarding money around your child is really important. So starting there, what is your money mindset? And remembering that you're teaching your child about money, whether you intend to or not. That language in the household, the attitude, the emotions that you have, you're teaching them about money every single day, whether you truly intend to or not. So being more deliberate about that is important. As I said earlier, I think that sharing your money stories with your child, perhaps you had some purchases that you made when you were younger or mistakes that you've made, that trial and error. Children learn really well through storytelling. And so sharing some of your stories, things that you've perhaps been successful with and mistakes that you've made, are going to also leave an impression. So that's really my first money mindset and kind of setting the stage there. The second thing is and we talked about this earlier, beginning the conversation, just beginning to build an open dialogue about money with your child and within your household. Rather than making financial decisions internally, think out loud, share some of those decisions that you're making out loud. Talk about why you're making that financial decision and what your thought process is. I think the other piece of advice in terms of conversation starters and discussion is the whole show and tell approach. Show them that process rather than just telling them. So the most basic, strategy of taking them shopping with you. And I recognize if you have toddlers, can be an absolute nightmare. But if you have an older child, middle school or beyond, and maybe even a little bit younger, taking them to the grocery store, using a cash only system and helping, them to understand out loud some of those decisions that you're making internally, those calculations that you're sort of internalizing. And then the last thing related to the conversation piece, and this was something that I just fell very naturally into as a parent, but I know not all parents are comfortable with these conversations. But I was very candid about making sure my child understood what things cost. For example, perhaps your son or daughter wants a new iPhone. I think making it really clear to them how much that costs and how many hours you have to be at work in order to purchase that item. And really being candid about how much we have available to spend and what it takes to purchase that item. When I'm in classrooms, I'm always struck by the fact that high school students, in particular don't necessarily know what the average earnings are from Mainers, or what their parents earn and what things cost in general. A gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, a dozen eggs. So I think as much as you can engage them in the reality of what things cost day to day, that can be very helpful.
A key takeaway in all the conversations I had with Mary really is that it's just never too late to have these conversations. It's better to help our kids make money decisions now, regardless of when you're getting started. Make those mistakes and learn. I mean, we're all still learning here. She said it best. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to be the expert. But we all do have a lot more to offer our kids when it comes to money lessons than we probably realize. Thank you to Mary for her expertise, and to you for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts, and consider a positive rating and review so others can find the message as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.